Hello, this is the Terry Nutlop Model Railway Station, a light here for all things model railways. Today we're going to be making some trees. We're going to have a look at the layout, which is as good as finished, because the layout is never finished. And I'm going to be telling you, stop railway modelling. Let's get on with the show. Okay, welcome back. I hope you're all enjoying the series so far. We're coming to the end of this series, but we're going to continue on. More of that at the end of the show. So first, we're going to have a little part about making trees and how I make them for exhibitions, and also your other choices. So let's just get straight into this little film about making trees. So today, we're going to be looking at some trees and the different ways you can make trees and what you can buy. So the first thing that I'm going to show you are these little trees that come from Temu. Now, as you can see, we can get the camera to focus on them. They're okay. They're relatively cheap. They're quite small for 00. They're fine for N-gauge, and certainly for Z, they'd be quite a big tree. But they're not perfect, but they're very cheap. Now, you can buy trees ready-made right up to £30–40 per tree, and it depends what sort of money you want to spend. Another option is to use seafoam. Now, as you can see, this seafoam immediately looks quite realistic like a tree, apart from the fact, of course, it doesn't have any leaves on, and we can add leaves later on. But the only thing I find wrong with this is it's very, very brittle, very fragile, and this is great in an area where it's not going to be touched or moved at all. But in an area where people could reach across and knock it, this will break very easily. In fact, I shall show you how easily it does break. It simply snaps as easy as that. And you'll find that if this is a tree on the edge of a layout like this, it will be very, very vulnerable to being broken. So I wouldn't recommend it for anywhere on a layout other than out of the way at the back. And certainly if it's mixed in amongst other stronger trees, then it will be fine. But as I say, on the edge, a bit vulnerable. Now, you can make your own trees by twisting wire together to make an armature, but I prefer to use these. Now, these are Woodland Scenics. Now, these cost about £16 for 12, and these are plastic armatures. Now, as you can see, right there, they come with a little base, so you can put them flat onto the surface if you want to, or with the little peg you can plant them into the foam. What they need to do here is bend these into shape, because it looks great like that, but if we turn it sideways we can see that it's been moulded in a two-dimensional fashion. So all we need to do now is bend this into shape, and then we'll get on to the next stage of how I make trees. Right, so the first thing we're going to do, I'll show you with the little snippers, is remove that little flat piece, because I'm not going to be using that. I prefer to plant them direct into the baseboard. So we remove that with the little snippers, put that to one side. And then what we need to do is twist these around. I tend to twist them out and sort of flat, bending all the little branches as I go. And what I try to do is think how a tree would grow, and they tend to spread out. And so in order to do that, I tend to try and twist the trunk. These thick ones are particularly awkward to twist right down at the bottom, but you can twist the trunk round to 90 degrees and just keep bending it out and folding it out as we go. You can put little curves up in these branches and bend them out. They're quite easy to do, but if you find they're a little bit difficult, sometimes putting them in some warm water for say 10 minutes will soften them up enough to make them very easy to bend. But I can normally get on okay with them like this, just at room temperature. They won't snap. They're made of a very twisty, bendable plastic, and you can just keep bending them to the shapes you want, putting bends in, and we'll just keep going until we've made a realistic looking tree in 3 dimensions. Okay, so there is the tree finished. As you can see, it now looks more like a realistic 3D tree, and that's simply bending and twisting the branches out to the shape you want. Of course, if you wanted to make an actual particular tree, you could take it from a photograph or just do what you fancy. But basically, if you try to spread the branches out so that you can think of the light falling onto all the individual leaves and no branches growing underneath the others above it, then you'll end up with quite a realistic looking tree. So we'll put that to one side because now we're going to put some foliage on this. Or you could, in fact, just leave that as it is, which I've done on a scene only recently, as an autumn scene where all the leaves have fallen off. And I simply painted that tree and left them as it was. But now we're going to use some polyfiber, and I'm going to show you how to use that. So this is Woodland Scenics polyfiber. As you can see, it's green. And it says, great for shrubs, vines, undergrowth, and trees. Non-magnetic. There we go. And colour fast. So with this, the trick is to spread it out. Now, when you get it out the packet, it's in one great big clump. And basically, this is like a fibre that's woven. If we separate that lump off and put that to one side, if we look at this, it's in big lumps. Now, if you put that on the tree like so, with those lumps there in particular, it's not going to look too realistic. The time to be spent is to thin it out as best you can. And the more time you spend thinning it out, the more realistic the tree is going to look at the end. Now, that's a sort of, in the middle there, is the way you want it spread out. That really looks very thin at the moment. But we're going to add foliage to this with the use of hairspray. So the thinner that this can be made, the more realistic it's going to look. And I'm going to thin this out, which takes some time. As I say, the longer you spend on it, the more realistic it's going to look. And tear it into some pieces, and then we'll start attaching it to the armature. Right, so I've separated all the polyfiber up into pieces like this. The smaller the pieces, it's up to you. Obviously, the longer it takes to do a tree, but the smaller the pieces I find work better. And it's thinned out, as you can see, to be transparent at the moment. Now, when we spray this with glue and put the leaves effect on, then this will work great. But the thinner you get it now, the better the tree's going to look. So what I've done is I've given our armature here a little wash over with some very thinned black paint just to take away some of the plasticky look that the trunk has. Now, you can completely paint the trunk if you want to. I've just given it a very quick wash. Certainly parts of it actually aren't painted, but that's fine. I think that gives different tones to it, and you won't see a lot of this when it's all done. But it's up to you. You can paint it whatever colour, paint it a lighter brown, darker brown. You could even paint moss, etc. on the trunk, and you can go as far as you want. But no, basically what we're going to do now is put some PVA glue on these little spikes, just a tiny spot, and then we're going to start detaching the polyfiber. The polyfiber is quite clingy, and it will tend to attach anyway, but the PVA glue just makes the whole thing a bit stronger when it's on the layout. So we just add a little bit of PVA glue and we'll carry on. When you're adding the PVA glue, you want to get quite big blobs on there. It won't really have any effect if you spread it out very thin. You want to have quite big blobs of glue on there. Again, don't worry that this isn't looking very realistic at the moment. This will all be hidden when we finish the tree. But without this, you'll find that the polyfiber, although it won't come off by itself, if you catch it with your hand or something like that, which is quite likely as you do move about the layout, then you'll find that it starts coming off the tree, and then it's quite awkward to get back on, especially once it's got the foliage on. So little spot of glue will just hold everything in place as the layout progresses. So with a piece of polyfiber, we've got to try and arrange it so that it forms a big spread of leaves. Now this just is up to you how you do it. I'm going to attach it to this piece here, spread round and do it like so. I've found in the past how I used to do this was to do a huge big sort of mound over the top in one go. And to be honest with you, that ended up looking a little bit like candy floss. So I find now that by studying trees, which to be honest with you, I didn't used to do before, that if you put these on in pieces and actually allow yourself to see through to the trunk, this gives a much more realistic effect, because this is actually what trees are like. If you look at trees, you'll find that you can see the branches and the trunk quite a way up to the top. It's only at the very top that often the trunk and branches disappear in the final canopy at the top. And as the tree grows and the branches lower down spread, you'll find that you can see almost through a lot of trees. And this is what we're trying to replicate here. Don't worry too much about how this goes at the moment. Don't get too fussy and start fiddling about with it, because what you'll find is as you apply it, you'll get glue on your fingers and you'll find you start dragging it back off if you start getting too fiddly and too pernickety about it. So I just tend to get it on as we're doing here. What you don't want to do is sort of try to reach up. You want to try and do it in layers going across rather than reaching up to the top in one go, because as I say, that tends to result in that candy floss look if we were to go vertically. If we go around the tree as though we're trying to imagine each year of growth as the tree gets bigger. So I'm going to cheat slightly and go across the top. I always find that top part is solid because that is where all the sunlight is, and the whole point of the tree having leaves, of course, is to capture the sunlight. So if we finish off across the top, we can see we've got a bare part there and there. So this last part, I'm going to thin right out. I'm going to attach it there to that piece and drag it across onto that one. Now, already, although it's difficult to see, you've got quite a realistic looking tree. Of course, we can see those great big blobs of glue at the moment, but the glue will dry pretty clear, if not completely clear, and it's going to disappear in a second when we put some hairspray and scatter on. So the last part is to use a hairspray. This is just a cheap hairspray. You want something extra firm hold, or extra strength. You want a strong hairspray, and the cheap ones are the best because I find actually they're the stickiest. So this was just a cheap one. I can't remember where I got it from. And the scatter we're going to be using is the good old Temu scatter. Now this is the stuff that's been hoovered back up off the layout. As you can see, it's a bit of a mixture of colours now. And the greater the mixture of colours, actually the more realistic the tree will be. As you can see, it's an overall green, but it's got some light and dark, and it's got little bits of brown in there as well. That will look great on the tree. And we need to spray down onto the tree. We don't want to be spraying across because we'll get the glue all over the trunk and the branches. We want to spray down onto the tree so that the glue goes onto the top of all this polyfibre, not onto the sides, certainly not onto the trunk. Tiny bit on the trunk, it's not going to hurt anything. Don't panic if you do it, but we want to try to avoid it. So little puffs, don't drown it, little puffs of glue. Where you can see the polyfibre now is holding the glue, and it's going white. Where that's white, the foliage is going to stick. If you think you want to leave little patches, that's great, you can. Spray my hand there. You'll get this, you end up spraying half of it all over your hand, and you end up with a foliage covered couple of fingers. So possibly, if you don't like scrubbing your hands afterwards, you might want to wear gloves doing this. We're just going to scatter very lightly, the scatter over the tree. Again, from the top, allowing it to fall down across all the leaves and the foliage that we've created now. Making sure it all goes on. I've got a little metal tray underneath, as you can see, to catch it. That way we can reuse it on the next one. I'm sprinkling it out the pot. Once you've got quite a bit in the tray, I sometimes find it's just as easy to pick it up and do it with your fingers sometimes, particularly if you want to get a little delicate part, just like this bottom part down here now. We only want a tiny bit on there. Little shake to shake off anything that hasn't taken. And that's it, that's your tree. No, I actually think that looks quite realistic as a tree there. That really took 10 minutes to make. Obviously you've got to buy the armatures, but I think for 10 minutes that's quite a realistic tree, and it shows people have said that these trees that I do look quite realistic, and people have asked me how I do them. So this is just an example. So this now needs to be put aside to dry. Try to keep it upright. I'm going to put it standing up as best I can sideways in a little pot so it doesn't fall over. If you can always put it in with the little spike into a piece of foam and keep them upright. But they really do need to set now for about 12 to 18 hours. Then that will be perfect, and we can plant that on the layout. I'll just show you a couple of other things you can do with those Temu trees, just to show you what you can do to improve them. So with the Temu trees, we're going to give them exactly the same treatment with the hairspray. This is not going to change the shape of them, but I think adding a little bit of this texture just here and there to them dramatically changes that overall shade of green. A little bit of plastic fell in, there we are. I think that dramatically changes it from that very uniform all over green that they come with, because that's just the moulded plastic that they're in. And that's passable as a tree. I'm going to put a few of these on the layout. They're very strong, that's one of their advantages, and of course they're very cheap. And as I say, for N-Gage or Z, certainly these would be fine. And we're going to use a couple on the layout, and you can decide what you think at the end. The last thing, we're just going to have a look at that Seafoam and see what that comes out with the same treatment. So with the Seafoam, we've got this very, very fine appearance already. So we only want to give a very, very light spray of the hairspray on it. Little shake. There we go. That could actually do with a little bit more. I think we could improve that. You can always layer this, of course, being hairspray. As long as you don't start touching it and poking it with your fingers, just scatter more material on. You can always add more, of course. Far easier than to put too much on right at the start and end up with a great big clumpy, unrealistic mess. There we go. That's making it look far better. Wait for it to stop wobbling. Now, I actually think that these Seafoam trees done like this really are probably one of the most realistic trees you can get. As I say, their only downside is how fragile they are. And certainly some people support that central core with a piece of metal wire. You can do all of that. Like anything, it depends how long you want to take, how much time you want to spend on it, and also, of course, how vulnerable these trees are going to be. I'm going to put this tree towards the back where hopefully it's not going to get knocked, and it should survive. It won't dry out. It's completely dried out as it is. So you don't have to worry with things like that. It's just it getting knocked and broken, which, as I say, it's very vulnerable to. So we'll go away, and when we come back, we're going to see all these different types of trees on the layout. Right, so that was how to make some trees. So we're going to have a look at the layout now and see how it's progressed. As I say, it's nearly finished. And after that, we're going to have something quite radical. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Here we are with the layout as good as finished. And as you can see, we've got the Temu trees here that I've decorated. Our bus, I've slightly adjusted the road. We've got a painted buffer stop, and we've got the Seafoam tree here. I've left this area open, as you notice, so that we can use the uncoupler ramp and the hook that goes in to uncouple wagons. Therefore, we want to leave this area unobstructed to do shunting. I'll turn the engine off because, as you can hear, the Hornby engine that comes with the set is a little bit noisy, and I'll put something a little bit quieter on, the Bachmann 08 shunter that you can see sitting in the siding, and then we'll look at the rest of the layout and see how it's finished. So with the Bachmann shunter going round, making a little bit less noise, I can point out a few features. We've got a little coal depot here with the coal yard, and when I turn the camera around, you'll see there's a little yard office as well, and the cliffs. And if you notice on the back scene, I've put lichen or lichen, however you want to pronounce it, along the edge, and that disguises the join between the back scene and the scenery. There's also a little gate. Now these fences are from Ratio, and in an episode later on we're going to be talking about how to make fences, or should you buy them, what's the easiest way to carry on, and we'll just move the camera to see the other half of the layout. Okay, so as the train comes past in a second, we'll just watch this Bachmann shunter go past with some nice weathered wagons on it. And we'll be talking about this in a later episode, how weathering wagons and detailing wagons and locomotives can improve their appearance, or of course it's optional, you can just leave them as they are. It's totally up to you. As you see, there's the yard office. I've painted that and given it a dark wash. These are the trees that I've just shown you how to make in the episode on how to make trees. Here's another tree on the edge, which just slightly disguises the coupler for the controller. And of course, we've got the bridge that we saw in an earlier episode. And I've put some fencing along the edge to make it a bit more realistic because of the sharp drop. You'll also notice there's some fencing along here. You'll see here there's a hedge that I've made with lichen again, and simply used hairspray to add some texture to it with the ground cover from Temu, in the same way that I added hairspray and texture to the trees. As you can see, the railway is virtually finished now. We can always add vehicles and figures to it, and we can keep going, adding as much as we want. Or, as I'm going to say quite radically in a moment, we can stop here and have a little think about what railway modelling is to us. So let's just go and have a look at the blackboard. So this is the Terry Nutlog blackboard. It cost me $13.95 and I'm determined to use it. So pay attention and sit up straight at the back. Okay, I'm going to say something quite radical to you, and that is stop railway modelling. So we've built the initial build. Now we've got to have a little think about what we're going to do. It's very easy when you start off in model railways to start going to model shops and going to exhibitions and spending a lot of money on things that you're not going to use or aren't suitable. Take my word for it, I've done exactly that many times. So I've done this to try and help people who are quite new to the hobby to have a little think about where we go next. And yes, of course, stop railway modelling is clickbait. I'm not actually telling you that. What I'm saying is have a little stop and think. And we've got the chalk just like a proper teacher. So we've had the initial build, and we can go two ways here. We can go into operation where we just have fun and run trains. And if that's what you want to do, then that's absolutely fantastic. You just carry on with that. And you can buy other bits and pieces, other wagons and other locos for this little layout, if that's what you want to do. But remember, you've got to keep them that are capable of going round radius 1. So that means you're going to be limited to 060 tanks and stuff like that. If you like shunting, you may consider moving on from this and having another layout. And later on in the series, we're going to be talking about making an exhibition layout, which will involve a lot of shunting. Or you might just like watching trains go by, in which case, of course, you can enjoy yourself just sitting watching the trains go round. And maybe later on, if we can develop some room, you might want a double track layout. And in that way, we're going to be showing you later on how to make a modular layout that can join together, so you can have a double track layout and see trains passing each other in opposite directions, just like the real railway on a modern double track line. And moving over, we've got development. Now we can develop this layout more with some more scenics. We've done some buildings, we've built some kits, but we might even want to attempt scratch building. We can also develop the landscape. Don't forget, we've still got the other half of this layout to work on. And with landscaping, you can do anything you want. Maybe you prefer the scenics to actually making trains. Maybe you prefer the trains to the scenics. It's just up to you. It's what you prefer. And this is why I'm saying at this point, rather than go and buy a load of things that maybe won't be suitable to you, just stop. We'll tap it again for double measure. Just stop and have a think and have a little play, practice, hobby, whatever you want to call it, with the layout we've built so far. Do you like the trains? Do you like the scenery? Do you like making buildings? Maybe, and we haven't got this on here, you'd like to modify the locomotive, make it run better. Maybe you'd like to weather it like I've weathered that Class 08 shunter. And we'll be dealing with that in another episode later as well. So just have a think about things now and don't go spending a load of money. Think about what you want to do, and that way, when you do spend money, you'll spend it on the right thing. So thanks for watching so far. And as I've said before, if you like it, please subscribe, and also tick the notification bell, and that way you'll be told when new episodes come out. So this is not the end. This is the end of this little mini series, but Terry Nutlog Model Railway Station is going to be here for a long time to come. We've got episodes on making model fences. We've got episodes on points. We've got episodes where we're going to be making an exhibition layout. There's so much more to come. So please keep tuning in, keep watching. Please please subscribe. As I say, it does help the channel. And all that's left to say is, this is not the end. Excellent. This is not even the beginning of the end.
Oh, but it is the end of the beginning. Oh, blimey.
So it's goodbye from Desmond and from me and from all of the other crew. And all I'd like to say is the catchphrase, which is, nice one. I'll see you next time.